The Drug Enforcement Agency is coming under fire in the wake of a bombshell report claiming DEA agents had attended sex parties with prostitutes. The report, put out by the Office of the Inspector General, says these parties took place in an unnamed host country, which is thought to be Colombia, and that they happened over a period of several years. And on top of that, information suggests the prostitutes in attendance were paid with cartel funds. This was all part of a larger report closely examining how law enforcement agencies under the Department of Justice had been responding to allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment. And in the case of the DEA, it was a bit more revealing than expected. A spokesman for the DOJ says that it takes the issues raised in the Inspector General report seriously and is taking steps to implement policies and procedures to help prevent them from happening in the future. Joining me now to talk about the latest revelation is Bill Piper. He's with the Director of Drug Policy Alliance. Bill, thanks for joining me. So I'm going to ask the very obvious question here. These are agents who are actually supposed to be, cracking down on the cartels. Here we have them sort of partying with prostitutes funded by those very cartels. How concerning is that?
This is very concerning, and not only were the sex workers funded by the drug cartels, but the report shows that some of the agents received cash, weapons, and other gifts from the very cartels that they're supposed to be fighting. And this is very much like during alcohol prohibition, when Al Capone and other gangsters were able to use the immense profits that prohibition create to corrupt law enforcement. And this is what we're seeing under drug prohibition today. And it just shows that the drug war really is a farce.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and the question on the other end of that is, what exactly are these drug cartels getting out of this? Any sense as to why they're sort of involved in this relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine they're trying to keep the agents off their backs. Mm-hmm. You're getting them to look the other way, getting them to go after their competitors. We see corruption all the time, not just with the DEA, but local and state law enforcement, in which law enforcement is paid to look the other way, or in some cases paid to arrest other drug dealers in order to protect other drug dealers. And it just, this is just what happens when you decide to spend so much money going after victimless crimes. You just end up with this kind of corruption.
Now, to be clear, the 10 or so agents who were involved in this say that they didn't exactly know that the cartels were funding these prostitutes. Is it possible that they really didn't know? I mean, is that a viable argument that they didn't know?
I find it hard to believe. I mean, and even if they didn't know who was funding it, they had to assume someone was funding it, and they gave their weapons and their badges to local law enforcement, most likely Colombian police officers, who watched over their weapons and their badges while they had sex with the sex workers. So they had to know some level of corruption was going on. If someone was paying for this, and it's doubtful that the Colombian police were paying for it. So they had to have known.
Right.
That
if they weren't paying for it, the Colombian police weren't paying for it. Who is?
So who is? And
right.
So it had to be organized crime of some sort.
And the DEA must have some kind of agreement with the Colombian government to sort of operate there. I mean, do you think this sort of revelation could really affect the coordinated efforts to really crack down on the drug trade?
I think so. I mean, what we're seeing, one, you have U.S. states legalizing marijuana, and we're kind of rolling back the drug war. So a lot of Latin American countries are asking, why are we subjecting our people, to this? Why are we bearing the brunt of your drug war? And then, to turn around and have, the agents, DEA agents, basically, taking favors from the very drug cartels they're supposed to be fighting. It just kind of adds to the fuel in Latin America. All those who are saying that we should just end the drug war and find some new approach, treat drug use as a health issue, for instance, which a lot of Latin American leaders are talking about.
And according to the Inspector General, most of these parties were actually held on U.S. government leased quarters where agents have their laptops, their Blackberries, all kinds of government devices. So then, of course, it leads you to believe that those devices were vulnerable or potentially compromised, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time that drug traffickers have used sex workers or other ways of getting access to intelligence that drug enforcement has. I mean, we've spent billions and billions of dollars, yet the drugs keep coming in, and part of that is corruption, and part of it is just as long as there's a demand for drugs, there's going to be a supply to meet it.
Now, the punishment for this, as far as we understand, was 2 to 10 days for those DEA agents who were discovered to have been doing this, or at least admitted to it. What do you think about that punishment? Do you think that that's fair, proportionate to what they did?
I mean, I think it's definitely outrageous considering the risk they put themselves in, that they put other agents possibly in, depending on what information drug cartels may have gathered. And just any time you have even the appearance of corruption, if you're not taking that seriously, why should citizens take you seriously as an agency?
Mm-hmm. And the question that's going to be in a lot of people's minds is, how does something like this happen? What is going on inside the agency that really allows for a mishap like this?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of this win-at-all-costs thing that's been going on inside law enforcement agencies fighting the drug war for a long time. I think they tend to look the other way when corruption happens. It's interesting to note that J. Edgar Hoover didn't want his agents working on drug offenses because they thought the FBI would be corrupted by all the illegal money. And that's why Nixon had to create the DEA, because the FBI didn't want to be corrupted. Now what we're seeing, of course, is that the agency fighting the drugs is being corrupted. And it's obviously not just this agency, probably all the agencies. Right.
Well, we know the congressional committee who does this sort of federal oversight work will be, having a hearing and sort of continuing an investigation on this. So this is definitely not the last we're going to be hearing about this. But I do appreciate you coming on and breaking it down. Bill Piper, Director of the Drug Policy Alliance at the Office of National Affairs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.